I am the Mortal Kombat champion. I am Earthrealm's champion.
What? Every origin of Liu Kang from Mortal Kombat. Hey guys, it's your best friend Drew. Welcome back to our channel. With Mortal Kombat 2 now playing in theaters as of May 2026, I just had to make a video on the main man himself. No, not Johnny Cage as per the latest film, but the lead protagonist of the entire Mortal Kombat lore. Yeah, none other than Liu Kang will be in the spotlight today as I take you through all the origins of this character, from the various storylines and series that he's been through, and continues to do so. This is going to be a fun one, so without a second to waste, buckle up, let's get started with it. Here we go. First things first, what's the thing you're reminded of instantly when I say the name Liu Kang? Some of you may think of these iconic fireballs, and some maybe even go with his classic flying kick. Those are great picks, and I hear you loud and clear. But hear my answer out now. To me, it just has to be the sound he makes when he fights. You know the one, the memorable "Wah!" This was, however, seen as unusual at the time for a video game protagonist. But over the years, I've seen that this has become greatly recognizable among the fans, as well as within the gaming community. Fun fact, this "Wah!" is actually homage to none other than Bruce Lee, who also loosely inspired the creation of Liu Kang in the first place. Now, let me take you to 1992, when the original Mortal Kombat hit the stores and the fans were, for the first time, introduced to Liu Kang. This Shaolin monk caught on to fans right away, and I think it's because of his crystal clear and simple motivation. He wanted to save the world, defeat Shang Tsung, and go home. That's it, plain and simple. Fast forward over 3 decades since then, and when you look at the sheer legacy of Liu Kang, you see a character who has one of the most dramatic arcs throughout his career that a video game protagonist could have. Liu Kang, a champion, corpse, revenant, and god. And what else? Here's a character who's been killed by his enemies, and even by his mentor, and has also been revived as a puppet of evil. And that's just a fraction of what we have in store for you moving forward in this video. But this makes me jump into the actual in-game lore from the very beginning. Who is Liu Kang? Liu Kang. Mortal Kombat. In the original Mortal Kombat game, Liu Kang is initially seen as a member of the White Lotus Society, who decides to leave the order for the Shaolin temples in Shang Tsung's tournament. His motivation is as straightforward as it gets. He believes in the Shaolin cause and wants to win this tournament. He also despises Shang Tsung. Anyway, he defeats Goro and then triumphs over Shang Tsung as well, which makes him Earthrealm's champion in the first game's tournament. And that said, here's a little trivia for you. In the first game, you can see that Liu Kang's victories were relatively and significantly less gory than the rest of the roster, who were frequently involved in brutal matchups that literally saw decapitating incidents regularly. But the developers wanted to portray Liu Kang as a hero you could root for. So, with these purely martial displays, he was seen as a clean fighter in a rather messy tournament. Mortal Kombat 2. But this cleanliness seemingly was a short-term preaching, even less than that maybe. Moving to Mortal Kombat 2 now, and we start right after Liu Kang's victory. There are some serious repercussions to his win, because when he comes back to the Shaolin temples, they are in absolute ruins. His Shaolin brothers were slaughtered in his absence by certain outworld forces, led by the Tarkatan Horde under the orders of Baraka. But this officially sets the first time we see a pattern, the same pattern which is followed and repeated throughout his lore. That is, Liu Kang wins, but something precious or personal is taken away from him. As a result of the Tarkatan Horde's actions, he travels into Outworld, all enraged and hoping to seek revenge by challenging their emperor Shao Kahn directly. This journey also brings Kung Lao into the spotlight as Liu Kang's fellow Shaolin ally, with whom a legendary duo would be formed. This is the central heroic duo from here onwards in the franchise, wherein of these equally skilled members, Liu Kang is seen as the chosen one, and Kung Lao, while overshadowed, is always fighting by his side, staying underrated throughout his whole career. Mortal Kombat 3. On to the third chapter with Mortal Kombat 3 here, and I must warn you of a surprising move the creators made, which is that the stakes are raised to an apocalyptic level, and you'll see as we move along. So, in the aftermath of Shao Kahn versus Liu Kang's matchup, we see the former refusing to accept his defeat. This desperation leads him to use Sindel's resurrection on Earthrealm as a loophole to launch his invasion, gradually merging Earthrealm with Outworld and stealing the souls of billions in the process. It was an illegal act that turned the conflict into a full-scale apocalypse, with only a few chosen warriors protected by Raiden. But, much to Shao Kahn's shock, Liu Kang fights everything thrown in his path and defeats him once again. This tallies up to a third consecutive victory in general for Liu Kang across 3 games. Mortal Kombat 4. And by the time we get to Mortal Kombat 4, he adds to that number with another massive win, this time over the fallen elder god Shinnok, which saves Earthrealm and even the heavens themselves. At this very point, Liu Kang deserved to be called the greatest warrior Earthrealm had ever managed to produce. No other fighter in the history of Mortal Kombat has held a record quite like this, especially when he's done everything that was asked of him and so much more. But hear me out, it was this perfection, this zenith of his career, which had paved the way for the beginning of the end. That's because, for a 4-time undefeated champion, there's nowhere to go except down, if you look at it purely from a narrative's point of view, which is exactly what the next installment got for us. Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance has an opening cutscene in which Liu Kang gets ambushed while training. This was a master plan by none other than Shang Tsung, who disguised himself as Kung Lao and had Liu Kang distracted, which allowed Quan Chi, a demon sorcerer and another major villain in the franchise, to attack him from behind. These two executed their stunning plan to perfection, which ended with Shang Tsung snapping Liu Kang's neck in half and consuming his soul. Mind you, this is just the opening of the game, by the way, and we already have our 4-time champion and the hero of the franchise dead before the story's even kickstarted. To this day, this unpredictable turn of events shocks me. And now this feels like a statement made by the creators to suggest that the evil in this universe is never really gone, and that even the strongest of heroes, in this case Liu Kang, who is unplayable in this game, can also fall. Mortal Kombat Deception. Thankfully, Deadly Alliance is the only mainline game where I can say Liu Kang and unplayable in the same sentence, because Mortal Kombat Deception brings our hero right back into the crux of the conflict, with just a bit of a variation. In the game, we see a zombie version of Liu Kang, whose corpse had been reanimated by Raiden after the events of Deadly Alliance, while Liu Kang's spirit remains separate and watches in horror as the champion that he really was is turned into a monster, whose body is used as a weapon against everything he once protected. Narratively, that felt really tragic, almost like the ultimate insult to the real legacy of Liu Kang, whose corpse is now used as a violent instrument by a darker, desperate Raiden, while his spirit tries to help undo the damage. However, this phase also marked the final stage of Liu Kang's trajectory, going from becoming a champion to a corpse, and now to a mere puppet. Mortal Kombat Armageddon. The original timeline apparently saw it all, especially in the case of Liu Kang's character. And Mortal Kombat Armageddon managed to bring the whole timeline to an official end in quite a chaotic manner. We saw every fighter from every era of this franchise converging on a pyramid in Edenia to fight each other out for the godly powers of Blaze. Liu Kang, in the unrestored form of himself, participated in the mass battle as well. This saga ended with the victory of Shao Kahn and the death of nearly every character. Although we see a bit of a tease for the future when Raiden sends a desperate message through time to his past self, saying he must win.
Didn't I say? He must win.
This message would go on to set the stage for the reboot in 2011, which is basically a reboot of the first 3 games that took Liu Kang's story into even other darker territories. So you better keep this in mind when we get to that. Other pieces of Mortal Kombat media. Now, before we get to that very reboot, I feel compelled to respectfully shout out the side canon and non-canon appearances of Liu Kang across different media. The Mortal Kombat film in 1995, which starred Robin Shou, was the most definitive live-action version of Liu Kang for many fans, including myself. There's an added emotional layer to the story here where Shang Tsung, who kills Liu Kang's brother Chan, gives him a very personal reason to fight beyond duty. All in all, Robin Shou's performance is really solid and laid the template for how the character would be perceived by the commercial audience for decades to come. Following that came the shambolic sequel in the 1997 film Mortal Kombat Annihilation, which is rightfully considered one of the worst video game adaptations into film ever. This one has Liu Kang heading Earthrealm's resistance against Shao Kahn's invasion. So, pretty generic, I know. But a year before this flop sequel, there was an animated series as well, titled Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm. If you ask me, this version had a great interpretation of Liu Kang as a character, who was once again the leader of Earthrealm. Along with this one, there was also the Malibu comic series from the mid-90s, and that explained Liu Kang's role beyond the game endings with actual dialogue and characterizations. One of the most fascinating touches here comes from the Battle Wave material, where Liu Kang is written as having left the Order of Light and living as an architect in Chicago. It's an experimental touch, but definitely a fascinating one for me. And while we're on alternate versions, Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks deserves a separate shout out as well. This 2005 game retold the Mortal Kombat II era through Liu Kang and Kung Lao as co-leads, making their brotherhood and action-heavy dynamic the entire engine of the story. It may not be the cleanest mainline canon version, but as a Liu Kang spotlight, it gives him one of the most playable and heroic adventures, and is one of the only times Mortal Kombat's deviated from the fighting game franchise. Then there is Mortal Kombat vs. the DC Universe, where Liu Kang appears in a crossover setting that obviously stands apart from the main canon. But it still matters when we're discussing his broader media footprint. And the animated Mortal Kombat Legends film also deserves mention, especially because they use Liu Kang inside the familiar tournament mythology, while shifting the weight of certain events around other characters like Scorpion. Now, all of these stories that I just mentioned outside the main video game canon did have a considerable impact in their own ways. They cemented Liu Kang's character as well as his legacy in commercial pop culture. However, I do have to make it clear that none of the versions has had any kind of impact on the original canon of the mainline games. So yeah, there's a little side note before we proceed. Mortal Kombat 9. Alright, on to the 2011 reboot called Mortal Kombat 9 now. We rewind the clock all the way to the very beginning of things, since that's where we start from. Here's the part where I bring back Raiden's last act and I wanted you to keep in mind, which is where he sends a message to his past self. So yeah, I asked you to keep that in mind because that ends up changing the flow of events altogether, as we see him attempt a shot at preventing a particular disaster, but that only causes more problems than it solves. And this happens numerous times. Meanwhile, Liu Kang repeats his classic role as Earthrealm's champion during the retold tournament events. But once again, the relationship between the mentor, Raiden, and his student Liu Kang begins to crack, mainly due to the former's erratic behavior. The one specific addition to this version of the story is the explicit nature of the relationship between Liu Kang and Kitana, a romance which goes on to become a key emotional anchor for the reboot era, and one that builds up enough of an emotional weight for itself to get us devastated for what's to come. And that particular moment turns up in the last few acts of Mortal Kombat 9. Here, Liu Kang and Raiden, as usual, are seen disagreeing over how to save Earthrealm, which is followed by the former saying the quiet part out loud. And that's about how Raiden's obsession with interpreting the vision has ended up causing more deaths than saving as many lives. However, Raiden gives his reasoning for this by highlighting his allegiance to this so-called vision to justify a certain sacrifice, and it turns ugly for the two. This confrontation turns into a physical brawl, and all of a sudden, Raiden accidentally electrocutes Liu Kang to death. It was the shock of a lifetime. The mentor killed his student through an argument that emerged out of genuine love for their realm. To me, this will always be remembered as one of the darkest moments from the entire franchise, if not the most. And I'm reminded of the superlative by being reminded of Liu Kang's final words to Raiden, where he says, "You have killed us all." Later on, Shao Kahn is seen defeated too, but the damage was already done. We also see Quan Chi go and capture Liu Kang's soul, with the sole intention of cruelly turning him into a Revenant, loyal to serving the cause of Netherrealm. Mortal Kombat X. From this stage in history, we move to Mortal Kombat X and start off 25 years later. Here, Liu Kang and Kitana return as Revenants, and by the end, they are positioned as the new rulers of the Netherrealm. The romance between the two is quite different from the previous version, since this one feels much more heartless and cold, with their actions more or less seeming like they came out of vengefulness and nothing more. The two also serve the fallen elder god Shinnok here, and end up attacking Earthrealm with the kind of rage their minds have been corrupted with. We see the 10th installment come to a close when Raiden decapitates Shinnok and tosses his severed head at Liu Kang and Kitana's feet. This was seen as a warning as well as a declaration of war. The father-like figure and the mentor of a warrior who has been turned into an undead corpse is out here implying the escalating sense of violence to come, instead of any form of reconciliation. Mortal Kombat 11. With that, we move to Mortal Kombat 11. And we're made pretty clear from the get-go that things are going to take a turn for the worse drastically in this one. I say that because it's here where we are first introduced to one of the most powerful villains in Mortal Kombat history. Yeah, I mean it when I say one of the most. This is Kronika, the Keeper of Time, who has her mind well set on wanting to restart the Hourglass altogether, erase the current timeline, and eventually rewrite the whole history of things, all according to her design. Kronika pulls past versions of key characters into the present, including a young Liu Kang from before his death, while Revenant Liu Kang also remains active. All of this just to further her cause. Miraculously, we get to witness the two Liu Kangs exist simultaneously. However, Kronika's plan involves keeping those two separate from one another, and also to never have Raiden and Liu Kang unite against her. For the second part to happen, she ended up manipulating Raiden across multiple timelines to have him kill Liu Kang over and over again, to ensure this keeps them busy fighting each other. But soon enough, Raiden understands this move of hers, and in an insane turn of events, Raiden decides to bury the hatchet of his age-old rivalry and goes on to merge his divine essence with Liu Kang, bringing together the living Liu Kang and Revenant Liu Kang's restored soul into Fire God Liu Kang. This resulted in the restoration of Liu Kang's original soul, reviving him with such essence that it created a new being in Fire God Liu Kang. This was someone who could put up a fight, and so he did. He fought Kronika and defeated her to take control of the Hourglass. The monk we all started with has become the god that was always written in his destiny. Mortal Kombat 11 Aftermath DLC version. The Aftermath DLC version goes a step further with the ending for Mortal Kombat 11. In Liu Kang's ending, the perpetual fraud in Shang Tsung tries to seize control of the Hourglass in the process. But that didn't last too long because Liu Kang simply went on to reclaim it right back. Now, definitely with the Hourglass with him, he makes a choice that showcases his character as well as his motivations, when he decides to use this very Hourglass to rebuild history from the ground up, instead of preserving the existing timeline, which contains a lot of people suffering. This vow had him go ahead and remove many of the threats and major tragedies from the previous eras, and start afresh by crowning the great Kung Lao, the ancestor to his old friend from the original timeline, as the first champion in this new world. This phase has Liu Kang as the god of Earthrealm, designing it as a whole, rather than taking up the responsibility of just protecting it. NetherRealm treated Aftermath as a major endpoint for the MK9 to MK11 arc, closing the chapter on Liu Kang's rise from champion to Fire God before Mortal Kombat 1 opened the new era. Mortal Kombat 1, the new era plus the Chaos Reigns DLC. But all of that said and done, I did have a feeling that it wasn't really the end of a franchise this massive. The potential for storytelling is immense in this universe, and with no surprise, the franchise lingered around. Leapfrogging all the way to 2023 now, and here we have a rebuilt timeline to kick off the new era, with this chapter titled Mortal Kombat 1. This universe follows the timeline set up by Fire God Liu Kang, and this narrative actually has one essential detail, as such, that may have us consider this a different storyline altogether and invalidate being labeled as a standard reboot. And that detail is, here's the same Liu Kang. That's it. Let me explain. He didn't reboot into a newer version. In fact, he's simply the architect of this one and is also present within his creation, as he watches over it and guides it himself. Remember when I talked about the original timeline and how the young Shaolin monk in Liu Kang was conflicted with his own destiny? Well, he deliberately planned to invert the roles that had initially influenced his own life, and he did so. This tale has Raiden as a mortal from Fengjian Village, who gets chosen by Liu Kang this time around to train him as Earthrealm's champion. I personally love this idea, and it really made me believe that this was the most fitting final run Liu Kang could have possibly gotten. His own existence was crowded with tragic events and instances of violence, so much so that he went back to square one and instead picked up the role of his most opposing voice. So now it's Liu Kang the guide and Raiden his student. Poetic to say the least. However, we can't have a Mortal Kombat story of feel-good and monumental paths for our characters. And with the poetic premise I just mentioned, we needed to have a poetic conflict at the core of this run too, right? Well, to fulfill that spot, guess who turns up? Not Shang Tsung! In this one, it's Titan Shang Tsung, a version of Liu Kang's oldest enemy from a timeline where he got his hands on the Hourglass. As a result, he invaded the new era with a whole army of alternate timeline versions of characters from the franchise. All of this forces Liu Kang to go back to what he does best, fight, and defend his most precious creation. As the most powerful interpretation of Yin, fighting against the most powerful interpretation of Yang. They battle it out, and it's inconceivable to a normal mind. It spans realities and has him finally defeating Titan Shang Tsung and ending his invasion. But that came at a price too. The battle forced him to reclaim his full power as Keeper of Time, which, in exchange, cost him his immortality. It was also made clear that he was to be succeeded by his loyal friend Garrus, who was also the former enforcer of Kronika. In 2024, with the release of the Chaos Reigns DLC, this story was continued per se, and introduced new threats from the likes of Titan Havoc, which tested the stability of the timeline that Liu Kang rebuilt for himself. Mortal Kombat 2021, the reboot film. But that's as far as the lore goes in the video games. It's been a while since we covered what's been going on with the live action side of things, and as far as adapting Mortal Kombat goes. In the 2021 reboot film, they laid their own path for Liu Kang's story by having him play a supporting character to a newly introduced protagonist in Cole Young. But this step for Liu Kang was intentional for the sake of a continued storyline for future movie sequels. Ludi Lin, who played this version of Liu Kang, who mentored the newcomers as an experienced warrior, said that he felt the weight of this character while portraying him, and also mentioned that he studied Bruce Lee's works to prepare for this role, as well obviously ensuring that he got to keep Liu Kang's signature red headband for the film. Mortal Kombat II, the movie. This film was set to have set the stage for the sequel, which was released only recently, in May of this year. In the sequel's tournament sequence in the climax, Liu Kang defeats Kung Lao before going into combat against Shao Kahn. But this affair was a bit too great to judge, since Liu Kang looks like he fell to Shao Kahn's warhammer. But then, his body vanishes right away from there like a phoenix. Writer Jeremy Slater's comments have framed Liu Kang's disappearance as deliberately ambiguous, leaving room for him to return in a more powerful, Fire God-style direction for the future. But as far as this film goes, it concludes with the remaining Earthrealm champions successfully capturing Quan Chi and planning a rescue mission into Netherrealm, with the hopes of reviving their fallen allies. Alright, so with that, we've come to the end of this video. This analysis of Liu Kang, his journey, as well as the interpretation of his character across the different video games, timelines, and other forms of media over the course of 4 decades makes him nothing short of a legend when you recount some of the greatest protagonists in the history of video games. Here we had the story of a warrior who fought so much and was successful against the toughest of odds, yet his destiny never sat right with him. The choices he made with his actions and decisions were mainly a result of his internal as well as his external conflicts, and those very choices proved to be the main factor in shaping his character and his motivations. So here I am asking you, which is your favorite version of Liu Kang? Which one hit you the hardest and why so? Me personally, I'm a Shaolin monks guy. I'm so eager to read your answers in the comment section down below and come across fascinating perspectives from you folks. Now, as always, if you enjoyed watching this video, drop a like on it and share it with your friends too. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to more content just like this. Until next time, take care and ciao.